So, I'm going to talk about ancestral healing through shamanic journeying. This is a practice that I've been doing for, I guess it's been about, I don't know, it feels like a really long time. It feels like I've been doing this for like the bulk of my life, but really understanding what it is that I was doing, and purposefully going in and doing the work with intention more recently over the last 4 years. So, shamanic journeying uh, is basically the practice of quieting the self, quieting the mind, the internal dialogue, and allowing different images um, to be presented to the mind. So these images can often be seen as um, powerful parts of the psyche, different archetypal parts of the psyche um, that begin to speak to you through symbols. And um, usually there's a storyline involved. So it's like the mind will create a story for you in order for you to, um, I guess, in order for it to transfer information over to your waking mind. And when that happens, it happens very, very, it's like a dreamlike state, right? So it's like you go into a dreamlike state, and you begin to unravel these different parts of self, which is coded in this very sophisticated ancient language, which is through symbols and archetypes and stories. And so we could do all sorts of things in that space. This is like the higher realms of the mind, and it's the deeper realms of the subconscious mind. And the shamanic journeying that I started to do in that space was really powerful. I've done a lot of healing through that space. And the way that I envision it is we're actually traveling through our own DNA, through our own blood code, through our conditioning, our childhood conditioning, societal conditioning, and getting to the roots of who we are. And being able to nurture the roots, heal the roots, and see clearly what kind of was passed down to us. And so what I recommend is, this is my practice, and I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to go into the space, but I've been practicing creating like a sacred space for myself for many years. And once that sacred space is really sealed into your temple, in your home or outdoors, it could be under a specific tree or wherever that is for you. The space should be somewhere where you're not going to be interfered with, ideally away from all the electronics, or you can shut off your router, and like a quiet space, and setting the mood to go into these inner and outer realms really helps with adding some various smells. I like to burn resins. Some people use like different essential oils. So creating the atmosphere, really, perfecting it through the senses. So the lighting's important, the smells, how you feel in your body. Often, just what you're wearing can have an effect on your state of mind. So all of the things that are going to have an effect on our state of mind, we want to fine tune and perfect. And from that space, we begin to sit quietly and tune in. So we start to tune into the deepest parts of self. And from that space, slowly, there's different things that you can use to bring the mind from the alpha to the beta to the theta state. But the theta state is where like a lot of this deep healing occurs. It's like in hypnotherapy, they want to bring you to that space, and it's sort of like hypnotherapy, self-induced hypnotherapy, where you're really just quieting the outer layers of the mind and really going into the deep, deep roots where things are very symbolic. And so I personally like to use a drum. So I made my own drum, and I worked with a native woman here she helped me make my drum, and in a sense, she baptized the drum for me. And so it's a drum that I only use for my journeying. I don't lend it out or anything like that. I do let my children use it, because I want them to get used to doing this work as well, because it is such powerful work. And so I start, beating my drum usually at the same pace as my heartbeat. And I'll slowly bring myself into this rhythm. So like the mind starts to quiet, and then these deeper layers of the mind start to get activated. And once the mind reaches that theta state, it's like this hypnotic state. Usually I'm drumming faster. So I go from the heartbeat, and then I pick up, and from a 2-beat drum to like a 1-beat, and then I'm going pretty quickly. And then I can feel my eyes start to move back and forth from left to right. And that's usually when I know I'm deep in this kind of shamanic space. And that's where a lot of the the really interesting stuff starts to happen. And so often people use spirit animals. So if you've been working with a spirit animal for a long time, you'll know what I'm talking about. But often there's like this transformation, this shape shifting that happens of the consciousness into the spirit animal, and then so I usually shapeshift into the spirit animal that I've been working with since I'm a child, and then I am brought somewhere, so that the sort of story begins to unravel. And as I'm traveling, there will be different symbols that will appear in the story that are powerful or that will stand out to me. And those are the symbols that sometimes I'll send like a message back to like my the part of my mind which is more awake, like I'm not sure which part of my mind, but it's like I take a little note, and to remember certain things, because there's a lot of stuff that happens, and it's really easy to forget once you come out. So I usually, like, if I see something that I know is very symbolic that I have to do research on, I'll just make a mental note somewhere in my mind to collect that information. And the story begins to unravel, and often doing ancestral healing, which, we can't always intend to go in and do that work. Sometimes even if we set an intention at the beginning to specifically want to do ancestral healing, sometimes the deeper parts of the mind, is working on different layers and different things that it must attend to first. So it's not always guaranteed. But with that intention, often there is an opening, and usually I'm brought through different timelines, so different time periods where my ancestors existed, and I will begin to experience some of the things that they experienced during that time while they were alive. And I believe that comes in through the bloodline, through the DNA, like these memories are kind of locked in there. And so often I'm shown horrific things, or sometimes I'm shown, very beautiful moments that they experienced. But all of them are giving me a sense of where I come from, like these, what my ancestors had to do to maintain my existence, to ensure that I would be born, at this time, through their struggles with survival and, everything that we have to deal with now, but in the context of when they were alive then. And so often, we can be given gifts, like we could be shown different things that they had perfected in their lifetime, that they had worked really hard on to perfect certain talents, gifts, and abilities. And then these things can be brought to the forefront in order for us to harness, because we know that they're there in our blood, in our DNA. Those are already there, so it's easier to unlock them, and then to pursue that and see if there's something to it, that maybe there is a creative ability that can easily come out due to the work that they did in their lifetime. And then there's often being shown like really challenging issues that they had to deal with, whether it's psychologically, physically, emotionally, or the context of that era, whatever was going on. And that, I think, is where the deep, deep healing really occurs. Sometimes the experiences in shamanic journeying can be really powerful. I've gone into complete, just crying, like all these tears just flowing. Like the memory is, can be very pronounced, even though it wasn't experienced by us in the here and now. Tapping into that through what our ancestors experienced, it just brings you fully into that space and time. And there's a release that happens, and the body can release that memory from the cells, from the DNA, and do the healing work on that level, just by remembering and being present and like nourishing that memory, like honoring it, and seeing also where that particular struggle or challenge that, that one of your ancestors went through, how that plays out in your current life, in your current psychological disposition, or some of the challenges that you faced. And it's like, wow, there's this connection that goes back really, really far. So the work is very powerful, and it does take practice to get there, to get to that space of being, quieting the mind, like that alpha part of the mind that's just like, talking and, very absorbing all sorts of, things from everywhere, to get to those deeper layers. But once you tap in there and you've practiced it enough, it is really, really easy to tap in at the drop of a hat. It doesn't take long at all. So it is worth the effort. And I think that this is the fastest way that we can begin to heal these really like deep core wounds, because that is like the basis, right, for the way we interact in the world today. And with everything going on, we have to have done the inner work ourselves in order to be able to collaborate and cooperate, and create solutions in the now. So I recommend everyone do it, and it is definitely worth it. Coming out of the shamanic journey, right away, it's really important to start writing down everything. And so the drumming will slow. You'll feel the shamanic journey kind of come to this. It sort of goes through this like wave-like motion, and it peaks, and then that's where you're retrieving like that really important information, and then it slowly starts to come down, and you can feel when the work is done. And then the drumming starts to slow just naturally. The cycle slows, and then I close the session, with the drumming. I'll close it, and then I write everything out. And I try to remember as much as possible. I'll stay there for as long as possible. You don't want to get up right away. You really want to sit in that energy and allow the mind, the body, everything to absorb what happened while you're in that state, and what symbols came in, what feelings came in. That is a huge part of the work, because if you go in and you do the shamanic journeying and then you come out, your mind will still process on a certain level, what you experienced, but you won't really be able to retrieve a lot of the important information that you can only see later on by doing research on those symbols, because we've been so far removed from the symbolic nature of who we are and how our minds work, it's necessary to go back and to research certain symbols in order to fully understand the story that they were unraveling to you. And so I spend time, I write everything out. And once I've written everything out, I sit there and contemplate, allow myself to come back fully into this time, space, reality. And from there, I slowly get up, and then, without doing too much, like just sort of stay in that energy, move around, have a tea, whatever, spend a bit of time just doing something like menial, crafty, or, cleaning or something like that, just staying in this kind of meditative space. And then I'll do the research. It's best to do the research the same day, like that, after, like without too much delay, like maybe 30, 40 minutes, an hour afterwards. Do the research because you're in that energy. And so there's still sort of messages that are flowing through and that are coming through. And so I find that energy helps guide me to really connect. If I'm doing research, it's like my intuition is more attuned to the experience that I had, and it's easier to be like, oh, this is, I'm going down the wrong path with this. Okay, I'm going to research it from this angle. And then I can usually find very accurate information. Sometimes I am given information in other languages and, languages that I don't speak and that my ancestors spoke, and I'm able to go and research them and find out exactly what they were telling me, which those moments are really powerful. And then I get a full, I can translate a full message. So this work is very deep work, and it is doing healing on the ancestral wounds. So wounds that we have in our body, in our psychological makeup, in our DNA that we are not aware of usually, because the stories weren't passed down to us. In the past, stories were passed down through storytelling. Oral communication was huge, and we just kind of share the stories, and we'd make sure that those stories made it down the bloodline. And nowadays, that element has been removed, so we've been sort of cut off from our roots. So we don't have the stories of our great grandparents like previous generations did. And so going in and retrieving that information is very, very valuable for us at this time. And I'd say a reason why shamanic journeying and doing the ancestral healing is especially powerful right now is because, coming into this dialectic with people from different cultures across the globe due to the internet, due to like such a heightened state of arousal that the world is experiencing through the pandemic, through the lockdown, doing this work really, one of the problems with coming into dialectic with other people is that if we are not solid in our foundation and we don't know our strengths and our weaknesses, where we might have been hurt, like where we have our blind sites, like it's very easy to not be able to engage in dialectic and to jump into like a triggered, emotional body response to what is being said from different groups, and different sources of media and stuff like that. So being really connected to where you come from, what sort of struggles you went through, and then healing, what sort of struggles your ancestors went through, and then healing that stuff really allows the roots to sink deeply, your roots to sink deeply into your essence, into your core essence and who you truly are. So, and then this allows us in exchange to feel more comfortable dialoguing with others who have a very different point of view from us, because we are so solid in our foundation that we're not so easily swayed. But yet we can feel confident in who we are and what we've experienced, and then stay open to the other and what they're sharing and what they've experienced. So until those deep, deep ancestral wounds are healed, it's very difficult to get into that space with anybody, especially during a heightened, during like a crisis or something like that. Without those deep roots, people just sort of fly off the handle really quickly. So, so doing this work is extremely valuable, especially for where we are now on the timeline, and I highly recommend everyone does it. So that's it.